It was 7 in the morning, and my wife was washing the car on the driveway again. For our 25th anniversary, I had given her a red 1965 Mustang convertible. It was a special gift, and I hoped it was worth the $20,000 it cost me. I was wrong. Julie was having an affair with one of the guys working in my office complex. She thought she was being discreet, but she wasn't. She was careless when meeting him, and he was talkative. I found out what was happening when some guys in the break room started laughing. Piecing it all together wasn't hard. Frank Tolliver was enjoying my wife's company and bragging about it to all his work colleagues. It had been going on for over 6 weeks. Twice I mentioned to Julie that I had heard stories about her and Frank and that I wanted them to stop. Both times, she denied that anything was happening. She also expressed extreme indignation that I had the audacity to doubt her fidelity after 25 years of marriage. We got married right after finishing high school. Now I realize that we were too young. I don't know if it was puppy love or just teenage infatuation, but it was about to end. We had a daughter, Sharon, who was in her senior year and getting ready to graduate. In less than a month, she was supposed to start at Iowa State University. Over the years, I had many opportunities to cheat, but I restrained myself to preserve our marriage. What a waste of time. If it weren't for Frank's loose tongue, I probably would never have known about Julie's affair. Now I find myself wondering if it had happened before, but I was too dumb to realize it. I always trusted her. Frank usually took Wednesdays off. I was willing to bet that Julie would spend no less time washing herself than she did washing her precious car. "Dad, can you give me a ride to work on the way?" Sharon was ready to go, so I finished my coffee and we headed to the door. I paused next to my wife as we walked to the car. This is the last time I'm mentioning this. Stop seeing Frank Tolliver. All I got was an angry glare. Damn it, John. Frank Tolliver and I have nothing going on. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Whoever is feeding you this crap is just trying to rile you up. Stop worrying about something that isn't happening. Julie turned away and continued wiping the car, while I just stood there watching her. Eventually, I approached the car and backed away. The first few minutes in the car were silent. Sharon was looking out the window, and I got the feeling that she was upset because of me. "What's wrong? Why are you so gloomy?" Without turning her head, Sharon replied, "Dad, how long are you going to let her get away with it? It's been a long time, and I really find it hard to deal with this crap. Thank God I'm leaving in a couple of weeks. I feel just as disgusted with you for doing nothing as I do with her for what she's doing. What crap are you putting up with? How does all this affect you? Your mom isn't doing anything at home, right?" "Nothing, Dad. It's Margie Tolliver. She takes out her frustration on me every day about how my cheating mom stole her father from the family. Her parents got divorced over a year ago, but she only started complaining 3 weeks ago. Clearly, her mom is fully aware of what's going on between Mom and Mr. Tolliver and complains about it every day at home. Margie's family life is a mess, and she shares it with me. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were so upset about this. I've asked your mother to stop 3 times, and each time she just denied it. I'll try to put an end to it today." The look my daughter gave me seemed to say she didn't believe me. "Anyway, thanks for the ride, Dad." I watched her walk into school and realized it was time to put an end to this. I knew where Frank Tolliver lived. When he got divorced, his wife took the kids and moved in with her parents. Frank tried to sell the house, but he was too underwater on his mortgage to break even. With child support and alimony, he had trouble making house payments. I had avoided the break room at work for the last month or so, not wanting to further diminish my dignity. I stopped for a coffee before starting work. After informing everyone of my presence, I told my secretary Joyce that I would be busy in a meeting on the 3rd floor during lunch and for the rest of the day. She said she would hold my messages until I returned. It was easy to slip out the back door and leave. I sat on the street near the Tollivers' house, waiting for my wife. She appeared after just 20 minutes. In fact, she had her own garage door opener for his house. After the door closed, I waited 30 minutes before approaching the house. No one noticed as I tried to open the side door of the garage. It was unlocked. Julie had a Mustang with a convertible top. Frank had a small BMW convertible. I'm not very knowledgeable about cars, but I knew it was an expensive one. I picked up Julie's purse, which she had left lying on the seat of the car. I would have liked to go into the house and catch them in bed, but that wasn't part of my plan. I didn't need to see it to believe it. Next to the lawnmower, Frank had a 5-liter gas can. There was enough to douse both cars and scatter some around the storage area in his workshop. By the time they realized the garage was engulfed in flames, it was too late to do anything about it. I had to hurry back to my car before any signs showed. As I turned the corner, I spotted a few wisps of smoke in the rearview mirror. 10 minutes later, I was back at work, telling the secretary the meeting was canceled. It felt as though I had never left the building. When I got home, Sharon was sitting in the living room watching TV. Julie wasn't there, and Sharon had no idea where she was. I was a bit worried. Had the two lovers been trapped in the house? Had they suffocated or burned alive? Were they in the hospital being treated for something? I was already regretting what I had done when the phone rang. The call was from Julie's sister. "Hello, John. This is Candace. I just wanted to let you know that Julie is at my house right now. She was in an accident with the Mustang. She's okay, but the Mustang is wrecked. She's a bit shaken up and can't talk right now. I'll bring her home later this evening, and then she can explain everything. Do you want us to come and pick her up?"
No.
"John, she's very upset, and I think it's better if you wait until I bring her home. She's sorry about what happened to the car." "All right. Where is the car now?" "I'm not sure. I think they towed it to a parking lot. Julie can tell you about it later." "Thanks, John. I knew you would understand." When I hung up the phone, I had a broad smile on my face. Sharon noticed it, said nothing, and smiled back. "I think you should take my car and go visit your Aunt Candace. Your mom seems to have been in an accident with the Mustang and doesn't want to talk to me right now. You could offer your help and snoop around a bit. I'd love to know what happened, but I can't ask. Maybe you'll have better luck. Just a tip if you're curious." "You know I'm curious. Give me your keys. Do you want me to bring her home or leave her there?" "Surprise me," I said. She chuckled slightly as she walked out the door. I settled in for a quiet evening with beer and TV. Sharon returned home about a couple of hours later, smiling even wider than when she left. "I didn't think you had it in you. You're a real son of a bitch, Dad. I like that." I was very careful. I wasn't about to confess to anything. Any conclusions my daughter might come to would be her own. "Where's the car?" "I'm not sure, but it can't be picked up until the insurance company checks it out." Mom didn't want to talk about it and was very evasive. "Where's your mom? Why didn't she come home with you?" "It seems she's worried about how you'll react." I asked her to explain, and she got upset. Candace said she'll stay there for a few days until everything settles down. I don't know what that means. I asked for explanations and got no answers. "I hope you don't have any questions for me, because I won't be answering them either." "Good boy, Dad. I don't want to know anything more. I can wait for the continuation." Sharon went to bed, and I grabbed another beer. Everything had worked out better than expected. The next day at work was a bit different. There were no snide remarks from the break room visitors. My secretary, Joyce, was even a bit more attentive than usual. Frank Tolliver did not show up for work. I didn't ask about him, and no one offered any information. Some guys seemed to avoid me. That afternoon, a small bouquet of daisies was brought to my desk. The note said, "Thank you, MT." Frank's wife was named Marcia. I didn't know any other people with those initials. Joyce now smiled every time she looked at me. I was a bit worried that Marcia had come to such a conclusion so quickly. I hoped the police would not do the same. When I got home, Sharon was in a good mood. Margie Tolliver had apologized to her for acting terribly over the past few weeks. They didn't speak any more about it. At the end of the newspaper, there was a small note about a fire at a house where 2 cars were burned. Candace called Sharon on her mobile and said that Julie would stay with them for a few more days. Sharon and I went out for sushi. On Friday morning, the police came to my office to discuss the fire at Frank Tolliver's house. They spoke with me in my office and also with Joyce. Joyce told them that I had been there all day Wednesday. She didn't mention the short time when I went upstairs. No one else could contradict our statements. It was strange because Joyce and I hadn't prearranged our stories, Yet we both said the same thing. The police did indeed indicate that the fire at Frank's house was definitely arson, but they had no other evidence. They were very, very careful not to mention my wife or her role in any of this. I found that interesting. I also wondered why Joyce went out of her way to protect me. On Saturday, Sharon was doing laundry and cleaning around the house while I was tidying up the yard. That evening we went to a pay theater and ordered pizza. We both tried not to talk about our problem. I was amazed by how much my daughter had matured. Julie came home on Sunday. She was wearing clothes that Candace had given her. I wanted to ask her where her clothes were, but decided against it. She spent most of the day in her room. Sharon cooked us dinner, but Julie didn't seem very hungry. We didn't talk or discuss anything about the car or what had happened to it. That night I slept on the sofa. On Monday morning, Joyce was in a good mood. The gang of jokers with sneering smiles had disappeared. Many male employees clearly tried to avoid eye contact with me. Frank took a week off. I contacted my auto insurer and asked him to come to my house to get information about the Mustang's insurance from my wife. I couldn't admit that I knew anything about it without exposing myself. I accidentally found out that the car burned in the garage was covered by homeowner's insurance, not auto insurance. This means that Frank's insurance company would have to pay for Julie's car. I was curious to see where this would lead. The arson investigation team and the insurance company concluded that the fire was indeed arson. After investigating Frank Tolliver's financial situation, the insurance company refused to pay any compensation unless he could prove that he was not responsible for the fire. They believed that the fire would bring him financial benefit and that he had a motive to set it himself. The police agreed with this view, but they had to prove that he did it. When I arrived, Sharon was home alone. She handed me a note left by Candace, stating that she had taken Julie to the doctor to get her a sedative, and that Julie would stay at her place for a few more days. The insurance agent left some papers on the coffee table. I didn't bother to look through them. Sharon and I went out to eat at Red Lobster. Officially, I never found out where Julie's car was and what happened to it. Officially, all I knew was that the Mustang was burned. I found it interesting that no one told me anything. The next morning, I quickly called Candace. "Hello, this is John. I just wanted to say that I appreciate what you're doing for Julie." "Thank you, John. I think she needs to stay here a few more days. The doctor prescribed her some pretty strong medication." "I don't mind. I only have 2 questions. I understand that her car was involved in the fire. I would like to know where the car was when it caught fire and why it was there. Call me later today and answer both of these questions. If I don't hear from you or get an answer, I'll bring all of Julie's things to your house this evening. Do you understand?" "Under the circumstances, John, I think you're being unreasonable. Julie is under a lot of stress right now. Things like this won't help her." "I'm not waiting for an answer from her. I'm waiting for it from you. I'm sure you know what's going on. Either you tell me, or Julie becomes your new permanent guest. Do you understand?" "I understand, John. I'll do what I can." Joyce was full of enthusiasm and joy. "I hope this was a good sign. I've arranged your lunch, Mr. Woods. You'll meet Marcia Tolliver at Olive Garden at noon. When you arrive, she will already be waiting for you at the table." I actually didn't want to have lunch with Frank Tolliver's wife, but I felt obligated. All I could do was try to be a gentleman. I looked at Joyce. "Would you like to come with me? I'd prefer not to be alone in this situation." "Sorry, boss. I'd be happy to join you for dinner, but lunch doesn't interest me." I noticed a slight smile on her face as she walked away. What the hell did she mean by that? I had never sent any signals to Joyce or anyone else who worked for me that I might be available. That was a strict no-go. I think my new status as a potential divorcee had an effect on some of the ladies around me. What the hell could Marcia Tolliver possibly want? Around 10 o'clock, Joyce popped her head in the door. "Mr. Brian Mays is here to see you. Are you busy?" "No, send him in right now." Brian was married to Candace. He was a big guy, resembling a yeti. Brian looked damn nervous as he entered the office and sat down. I just watched him for a second, waiting for him to start talking. "Candace asked me to visit you. She said she's afraid you'll get angry at her for what she's going to tell you." "Brian, you look damn troubled. Why is it so hard for you to talk to me?" I haven't done anything to cause this, have I?
No, John.
It's what I did. I'm out of my mind. Nothing like this has ever happened to Candace before, and I'm scared. Why are you scared? What could you possibly be afraid of? I think I hurt her. I hit her hard, John. I took her to the hospital, then came to see you. I didn't know what else to do. Brian is no fool. He's a smart man who provided well for his wife and kids. Both his children are now out of the house, but he's always been a good father. I never suspected there were problems in their marriage. Turns out, Brian hadn't either. Why don't you start from the beginning, Brian? We have plenty of time, so there's no need to rush. Joyce brought us 2 cups of coffee while Brian tried to relax, taking deep breaths. After a few seconds, he felt better. You're not going to get mad at me, are you, John? No, I promise I won't lose my temper. Candace told me that Julie had a boyfriend, Frank something or other. I don't remember his last name. She was at his house when the fire happened in the garage, and her Mustang was burned to the ground. Julie thinks you set the fire, but the police don't believe her. She's afraid to come home. She tried this weekend, and she had a nervous breakdown. That's what I needed to tell you. That doesn't sound too traumatic. I still don't see why this has upset you so much. I started asking her some questions, just to clear the air. Candace started getting angry at me. The more questions I asked, the more upset she became. What were those questions? John, do you remember the 3-day cruise the girls went on last year to Cancun? Yes. Why do you ask? I've always felt that there was something suspicious about that vacation. For some reason, I linked that trip to Julie's affair. I don't know why. I asked Candace if Julie had an affair during the cruise, and she exploded. I suppose you didn't get an answer. Oh, but I did. Not in the way I would have liked, though. She ranted for a few minutes about how you and I are lousy husbands. She said that if we were more attentive in bed, they wouldn't need to run around. That's the phrase she used, run around. It was around then that I realized Candace had been cheating on me too, just like Julie had been cheating on you. I'm sorry, Brian. It was not my intention to drag you into this. It all got worse, John. I insisted she tell me the name of the guy she cheated with. She laughed at me and asked, "Which one?" I think that's when I lost it. After I hit her a few times, she was terrified. She had never seen me furious before. For 22 years, I never resorted to violence, until this morning. She begged me to stop hitting her, and I said I wouldn't stop until she named them. She said the 2 guys they went on the cruise with were from their fitness club, Craig and Will something or other. Then she mentioned Frank as the guy Julie was with. I threatened to hit her again if she didn't give me all the names. I was not concerned with who Julie was with, but with whom she herself was. She mentioned Clayton Simmons, a guy we went to high school with. Before she could say anything else, I hit her again. Then I got scared, put her in the car, and drove her to the emergency room. I came straight here to see you after that. I was at a loss for words. What do you say to a guy who just beat his wife so badly she needed to go to the hospital? It seemed she really underestimated the gentle nature of her husband. Perhaps she would have gotten away with it if she hadn't tried to smear him in the mud. Big mistake. For a few seconds, we sat in silence. What now, Brian? I don't know. I think I need help, John. We didn't have to wait long. 2 uniformed police officers squeezed past Joyce and entered the room. Which one of you is Brian Mays? Brian meekly raised his hand, and they immediately handcuffed him and led him away. Joyce brought me a cup of fresh coffee. I asked Joyce to call Brian's lawyer before I headed out to lunch with Marcia Tolliver. There were free tables at the cafe, but she was not alone. Mr. Woods, I'm glad you came. This is my friend Mario. He's here as my companion. Mario was a very large man with dark skin and thick hair. He sat next to Marcia, but not too close. It was hard to tell what kind of relationship they had. The conversation was very superficial. For some silly reason, we discussed things like the weather and traffic. After the food arrived, we hardly talked at all. It was obvious that we both avoided the topic. After dinner, we ordered coffee, and Marcia cleared her throat. My husband's infidelities are extremely embarrassing to me, Mr. Woods. Normally, I'm very good at turning a blind eye to his foolishness, But after the divorce, I see that it was a mistake on my part. I can't do anything to fix what happened, but I can prepare you for what might happen in the future. Frank is a very cruel and vindictive man. If he feels that you are the cause of his troubles, he will do everything in his power to get revenge. I understand that he is to blame, but he won't see it that way. There's a chance he might manipulate your wife, making her do things you could never imagine. Despite her love for you, she might be more than willing to help Frank get even. I advise you in no uncertain terms not to trust her until you are sure of her. Do you understand everything so far? I just nodded. I can guarantee that Frank will try to harm you in some way in the near future. My purpose here today is simply to warn you to be careful. I will do everything in my power to help, but I'm afraid that might not be much. Mario is with me because of Frank. Mario is my brother-in-law, and he will be here until my family resolves my issues with Frank. Do you have any questions? I had 100 questions, but I shook my head no. We finished our coffee in silence. Marcia insisted on paying the bill, and we went our separate ways. I used to be angry about all this, but now I was scared. Work was quiet. Joyce was dying to know what happened at lunch, but I didn't feel like talking about it. Brian's lawyer was busy posting bail. I felt I should do something for Candace, but decided against it. I took the day off and went to Sharon's school. It only took a few minutes for the school administration to allow Sharon to finish school early. She was able to return her textbooks and clear out her locker in less than an hour. She would miss the graduation ceremony with her friends, but it seemed she didn't care. On the way home, I called work and asked Joyce to put me on a 2-week leave. I hadn't expected to be gone that long, but it seemed wise to have some extra time. Sharon had already packed most of her things she was taking with her, so loading them into the car was pretty easy. Under the circumstances, I would feel much more at ease knowing Sharon was 1,000 kilometers away at school, safe. There were no problems getting her into the dormitory early. Old Mr. McElhenney, who lived across the road from our house, was more than happy to collect our mail and newspapers while I was away. The drive to Iowa took a few long days, but since we both took turns driving, it went by relatively quickly. The drive home alone took much longer. At least, that's how it seemed to me. The home I knew was no longer there. All that remained of the house was a pile of charred boards and a bunch of yellow tape. Perhaps I should have given old Mr. McElhenney my mobile number before I left. It was already late, so I checked into a motel for the night. In the morning, I would have plenty of time to talk to the authorities. It seems Marcia Tolliver knew her husband quite well. After a hearty breakfast, I called Joyce. Everything was fine at the office, but Frank Tolliver had been arrested. She didn't know more than that. She said I owed her a dinner. I called the Mays home, and Brian answered the phone. "Hello, buddy. Glad to see you're out of jail. I was hoping you could fill me in on what's happening. How did you end up back at the house? I thought Candace had kicked you out." "John, have you been home yet? Your house is gone." "Yes, I know. I had to stay in a motel last night." "Well, welcome back to reality. Candace and Julie moved back with their parents. The only problem is that Julie is now in jail along with her boyfriend. Here's what I'll do, Brian. I'll stop by this afternoon, and you can bring me up to speed." The day promised to be busy. First, I went to the bank to see if I still had any money. Fortunately, Julie hadn't made it to the bank. I closed all accounts and credit cards. At least I had some cash on hand. I canceled Julie's mobile number and paid off the fine. I saw no reason to change my own mobile number. After the trip, I figured no one knew about it anyway. I stopped by the police station to see if I needed to sign any papers or provide information. A guy in a suit and tie talked with me for about 20 minutes, after which I left. Old Mr. McElhenney had done well for me. He saw Julie and Frank entering the house. He even recorded Frank's car number. Julie took out a couple of batches of clothes, and then they set the house on fire. They did it late at night, but McElhenney never misses a thing. For once, I was glad to have a nosy neighbor. Julie confessed to the police that they did it, but it was out of revenge because I had burned down Frank's house to the ground. I called Brian and asked him to meet me at the Dreamland bar. I felt like treating myself. He quickly brought me up to speed. Candace wanted a divorce. He agreed, provided she would drop the assault charges. Now they just had to wait for the right time. At that moment, I didn't know whether Julie wanted a divorce or not. I know she did. Candace and Julie were living with their parents, but it was not the best arrangement. When their father found out what was happening, he let loose on all of them. Now, Candace is at home recovering, while Julie is in jail, waiting for her father to post bail. I liked how things were turning out. I called Sharon and told her about the house. Joyce was glad to see me the next morning. I managed to get all my work done in record time. The company decided to fire Frank. I didn't know the reason why they did it. His buddies from the break room avoided me like the plague. I liked that. Julie's father called me to see if I could help post bail. I told him the only way to raise the money was to take out a second mortgage, which I was sure the bank would not approve. He didn't appreciate the sarcasm, but I think he got the point. He must have been desperate to call me. After lunch, I stopped by my lawyers and started the divorce proceedings. I called Julie's father and told him I would post bail if she signed the divorce papers. It seemed he appreciated that I found a compromise that could help in this situation. I told him if he could convince her to agree to it, I would have everything ready by the next evening. An hour later, he called back and said she agreed. The insurance company was shocked by the claim. I insisted that Frank burned down the house and Julie did not actively participate, but they didn't buy it. Eventually, I gave up so they could handle it themselves. At that moment, I was a bit overwhelmed and just wanted it all to be over quickly. Unexpectedly, the company asked me if I was interested in transferring to Huntsville. It was unexpected, but I was pleased with the vote of confidence, as it was a good promotion. Joyce wanted to go with me. Over the next month, everything normalized. Candace recovered from her deserved beating and began to respect her soon-to-be ex-husband in a new way. Clayton Simmons was found severely beaten behind a local strip club. He either couldn't or wouldn't identify the person who did it. Brian and I joined the local health club that the girls used to go to. 2 days later, 2 long-standing members decided to quit. After that, we ended our membership. For some strange reason, my car insurance company decided to pay me compensation for the loss of the Mustang. Although I had bought it for Julie, it was still registered in my name. The issue of home insurance is still up in the air. Julie supported the prosecution's testimony against Frank and ultimately received 2 years probation. Frank ended up getting 10 years. Next week, Joyce and I are moving to Huntsville. I would love to tell you about our whirlwind romance, but I'll save that for another time. She wants me to buy her a 1969 Camaro. I'm thinking about it.
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments.